Well, we are back again at our round table, and today we have some amazing guests with us this morning. The most fabulous Alana, who's freshly married and has a whole bunch of stuff happening in her life. How are you doing, Alana?
I'm great, thanks, Taylor.
Excellent. And we have our in-house resident nurse who's been working ridiculous hours throughout this season, who has managed to not be at work and not be in bed and come share with us. So how are you today, Tan?
I'm awake. That's
You're
a
awake.
miracle in
Well,
itself.
look, by the sounds of it, it is a genuine miracle that you're awake. I most certainly couldn't do what you're doing. So today we're going to have a chat about three dudes in the Bible that got thrown into a fire. I can actually relate to that. No one else can. No, we're talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's a bit of a tongue twister, them names, but we're talking about the idea or the concept of them following God, not wanting to bow down to this idol and getting thrown into a fire, and Jesus turning up. Like Jesus actually meeting them in the midst of their pain, in the midst of this purifying moment for them, and what that looked like for them. And I think there's so many things that we can learn from the way that they, didn't bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar and a whole bunch of different things. And so this morning I thought it'd be great to get some insight into what that's looked like in your life. But my first question is a kind of a bit of a broad one. I just want to hear from you guys what your life just looks like at the moment, because not everyone maybe understands, Tanya, what it's like being a nurse at the moment, and not everyone, Alana, would understand what it's like to be freshly married, and maybe, I don't want to spoil your story, but not getting everything how you would once thought it was going to pan out. So maybe we'll start with you first, Tan.
Okay, what does life look like? Well, it averages 3 night shifts a week. Those are 10-hour shifts, and I get, if I'm lucky, about 4 or 5 hours sleep around that. So by the end of the week,
I'm out.
I'm about 16 hours down, and my kids will testify that means not just zombie mum, but grumpy zombie mum.
Yeah, it's hard.
And that's when life's normal, not when there's coronavirus running around. So now in between that, there's a lot of leadership, and there's a lot of admin and rosters and extra work-related things, emails and texts from people every day that just need time and conversations. And then on top of that, there's, 2 teenagers that have life and school and want to be fed and washed and looked after. And
then they're also in COVID as well.
Yep, they
are.
It's
affecting them as well.
And so there's, all of that side of life. And my mum, I still try and get to mum a couple of times a week to support her, at least recently. I haven't been able to do that for a while. So
I can imagine being a
busy.
nurse, in this season could be extremely feel like you're in the middle of a fire. And especially, I remember when COVID hit, I was like, Tassie will be right, and the northwest coast, of course, will be fine. We've got nothing going on down here. And then we become the epicenter of basically the whole country. So I can only imagine it being a monumentous, event clashing moment. So thank you.
It's been huge.
Thank you. Alana,
Yeah.
what does this season look like for a young lady that's just moved, not even that long ago? And then fallen in love, mostly thanks to me. So tell us, what's life look like for you?
So basically up until about March, right before it all started, you plan a whole wedding that's going to happen in June, which we're currently in. So I think last weekend we were supposed to be getting married in Western Australia. Mm-hmm. So pretty much had to unplan everything that was done and then try and replan it. I think we tried about 5 times to replan a wedding over here and in WA, and then we just gave up and we're like, nah, we'll just get married with 5 people in our home. But for me, I got laid off at work. Didn't really have any reasons around that. So that was really hard to understand why, and then come back to work and have my hours cut significantly. I've been working at church, so that's been great, and doing my studies. So
great. So it sounds like both of you guys have almost polar opposite ends of the scale. You got on one side, not having really any work or very little work and being just absolutely run off your feet, and both are a fire moment.
Yeah, I guess when coronavirus hit, there was the fire of the potential threat, which was everybody's fear around it and the anxiety with that, and then the actual threat of what we were going to be facing and all the practicalities around that. So, for me, my boys moved out because that was safe.
Yeah.
So that was hard. That was missing out on having them at home. I couldn't visit my mum anymore because she's vulnerable. Yeah. So most of the things, I'm a pretty quiet introvert anyway. I don't have a huge life, but even the bits that I had felt like they were dismantled.
Yeah, wow.
And even facing your own mortality, a lot of healthcare workers around the world have died. And so there was a point in time in work where we looked at each other and thought, one of us might not be here at Christmas. And so, to sit at home and get your will out and think about things, which my boys don't know, but if they're watching, that was part of the process of what I went through, was thinking about, this is what I've chosen to do with my life and this is what it might mean.
Yeah, wow. That's huge.
So that was it, and that's let alone, working in a spacesuit and all the fun and games that went with that and the setup. And then we had the outbreak and the hospital shut, and that was a grief. It was a trauma for everyone that was involved in it, because the community lost trust in us.
Yeah.
Nurses, fireys, police, all your first liners, where we've always been doing something that we were proud to do, and all of a sudden you couldn't wear uniform in public because the public didn't feel that way about you anymore. What was
that like? Like, what did that feel like?
Really confronting. And we knew the truth of, what we'd done, and there were failures, but it was hard. It's really hard to be looked at that way. And even when the hospital, has reopened and we've rebuilt this ward to care for people, it's been really challenging. There are people there who are stressed and grieving and in trauma, and there's been mutinies and betrayals, and still government organisation systems to work within. So that's challenges every day. So there's lots of fiery moments.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Like well, good on you. Take courage in this story that Jesus rocked up in the middle of that. And
always.
And I'm sure we'll get to some of them parts of your story. But thanks, Tan. What about you, Alana? Like, you kind of touched on, you missed out on a wedding. Without trying to make you feel bad, like your dad didn't walk you down the aisle. You didn't have your family. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, you're not going to make me cry.
I don't want to. I'll cry if you cry.
Yeah. So it was definitely a journey of coming to the realisation of the new choices that we'd made in this season. So, and I had to grieve that I couldn't wake up in the morning with my family. But I also had to look at what did I have in that moment. So that was really good to be able to know that God had actually put me in a family that cared for me the same way my own would.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that kind of leads to this next question, Alana, and maybe you want to speak into that. Like Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, they had to make key decisions to trust God. Are there any particular decisions that you made in this season, whether it be your work or the wedding or the various other things that were going on in your life, where you had to make decisions to trust God, and specific things?
Yeah. So I think coming to the realisation that no matter how hard we tried to replan our wedding, it was never going to be how we imagined it.
Right, yeah.
And so just deciding, okay, we'll get married this day, and whatever the restrictions are, we'll flow with it, and it'll happen.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it was about entering our covenant together. And so ultimately that's what we got, and that's what God gifted us on the day. So, and I guess even in my work situation, wherever God wants me to be, I've just learnt that I can't put my hope in my work anymore, and that it has to be in God. And it sort of hit me in the face with a cut of hours, but I think it's been really beneficial for me mentally to get to that point and be like, whoa, this is what hope is about in God.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It really has forced you to really put your trust in him, because coronavirus has been like a fire and stripped a lot of things from you. It's great, but good on you. And it was really cool to see that journey. Maybe coming back to you, Tan, and we're talking about, you know, in the midst of all this fire and trauma, you know, even you're talking about couldn't wear your uniform outside. I mean, that's a big deal. But how's God rocked up for you? Like, how has God blessed you in this season?
So many ways.
Good.
I think for me it's, well, I'm alive for a start, and I don't take that for granted anymore because some people aren't. Yeah. And I'm healthy, and I don't take that for granted anymore because even though we've got no coronavirus in Tasmania, there are still people affected by the aftermath of that, who are, you know, whose lives will never be the same. So for me, I think during that time when the world got crazy, it's really easy to lose your focus, and it's really easy to give up the little habits of spending time with God. And so for me, I had to stop and remind myself that I can't trust someone I don't know, and I can't know someone I don't spend time with.
Right.
And my mind was really distracted. I could find shoes in the fridge and butter in a cupboard because I was that tired. But if I could just pause, you know, and that's why the take 10 minutes to pray for church thing was just perfect timing for me. And sometimes I couldn't even string the words together, but a lyric from a song would run through my head, and I'd think, oh, thank you. You just know that's just what I need right now. So, and accepting that it was okay to rock up however I needed to rock up, he would be there.
Great.
And sometimes it was, I mean, you know, I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert, and I would find myself dancing in my lounge room.
Wow.
Because the sun was shining and a bird was singing and God was good. Yeah. And I would find myself going back to just being grateful and saying it out loud. And it was almost like a fight. It was like I was waging war against this virus and everything that was tearing down. Yeah. And I was like, but I'm grateful for this because he's done it. Yeah. And I'm grateful for this because he's done it. And, you know, like today, the sun is shining, the sky is blue, and God is good. Yeah. So
you just really felt like making moments to find his presence was really what sort of propped you up through this time.
Absolutely. And he would show up in ways that were just sweeter and deeper than I expected, and really simple, just simply beautiful.
So do you feel like you're always experiencing new ways of God shining his face on you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is a really good thing because, you know, the older you get, the more you realise you circle back to the same stuff, and you wonder if he's going to get sick of you going over the same ground again and again and again. But
he didn't.
He doesn't. He just shows up, and he's just more sweet.
Yeah, wow. One of the things that I love about this story and this idea of fire, and the Bible actually talks more about fire and hell than it does about heaven, which is a topic for another discussion. But what a fire purifies. A fire actually burns off waste and it leaves the most pure entity. And so I'd be really curious to know from maybe both of you guys how this time of being in the fire, you know, being in the midst of all this has refined you as a person. Like, do you find yourself being more sweet or more patient, or I don't know, like it'd be interesting to maybe we'll jump to you first, Alana.
Yeah. So I definitely think that with all the trauma and the chaos of what's happening, you can be so negative. And I particularly can get in that little rut. Sure. But it's really been good for me. I think the way that I've been refined is I've maybe learnt to look at the cup is half full rather than empty. Sure. That's great. And look at the positives of what I do have. And like you were saying, Tanya, like I still am alive and I just got married. Like that's a huge gift. So just focusing and honing in on exactly what God is walking through with me. And it's not leaving me alone either.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just having an attitude that's refined me and having a positive mindset in that.
And a different perspective.
Which
is really hard to do, especially in the midst of pain. Have you found it hard though? Have you found it hard to get to that place?
Yes, and I'm actually finding it really hard at the moment to be like, oh, I can't actually go home and see my family, but to go, oh, but they're still alive and they're healthy.
Great. Yeah. Good on you. Thanks for being vulnerable. What about you, Tan? Like, have you found this as a refining moment? Because I mean, it sounds like you've been run off your feet.
Absolutely, and the probably humility would be the biggest refining thing. So that'll teach me for, my one word 2 years ago was surrender. Last year was all. Sometimes I'm a bit slow on the uptake. And this year's was joy. Okay. Go figure. Thanks, Rona. But it is joy in the midst of that. Nobody ever died from saying I'm sorry. And I've had to say I'm sorry so many times.
That's good.
I don't reckon a day's gone past in my work situation where I haven't had to apologise to someone for something. Whether it's mistakes, whether it's the state of the visiting, whether it's a patient stuck in a room alone for hours on end, because that's the nature of what we're looking after people in. Whether it's the staff who are uncomfortable because 10 hours in a mask that you can taste and your nose is breaking down and everything, it's just hard.
Do you feel like, Tania, you've learning that skill to say sorry has made you sweeter?
Absolutely, because I'm not, naturally I'm reactive. I'm not patient and I'm angry. I've had anger and bitterness issues for years that I've had to fight back against with God's help. To learn how to surrender those things and let them go to someone that I can trust with it.
Wow.
And I think what he's taught me this year is that the relationship is more important than being right.
That's awesome.
So some of the apologies I've made, I don't necessarily think things were my fault or there was anything I could have done about it, but if it was worth keeps the relationship, the relationship is always more important than being right. And didn't Jesus do that?
That's what he modelled.
All the time.
Yeah. That's great because, I think a lot of us could learn from that. Myself personally, I'm not always great at being quick to say sorry, but it's cool to hear, it actually helps. I would like to go out on a limb and say, you saying sorry to someone, maybe even when you didn't have to, that's Jesus. That's Jesus coming through you. Are there other examples or maybe you want to expand on that one?
Yeah, I guess it's, and especially when you have reacted, when you have, got angry about a situation or a system that's failing or things that aren't going the way that you think they would, and that's... Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego got thrown into a furnace for doing the right thing. So life doesn't always go the way we want it to.
Right.
In fact, I would go so far as to say often it may feel like it doesn't, and that things are not fair. But for me, this last couple of months, there's been a choice. You get to either choose the fear or you get to choose the faith.
Great.
And there's a lot of fear out there.
Yeah.
And you can either get caught up in that and become part of that, or you can have a look at your faith and man it up. And I don't have the strength to do that, but every time I've asked him for the strength, it's been okay. So for me, it's like, okay, furnace, yep, all right. But if not, in we go.
Yeah. Great.
Because he's good.
That's
and
awesome.
I hope that shows up to other people. I hope that they see that, I don't get it right every day, but I keep circling back to the faith.
Right.
If I give in to the fear one day, I try and circle back to the faith the next. And I hope that shows for people.
Yeah. I would go out on a limb and say it would. And so thank you guys for coming and having a chat to us today. Thank you for being open and honest and vulnerable. And Tan, I, on behalf of the church and the community, want to thank you for what you and your staff and work colleagues have done, and it's amazing. And Alana, thank you for leading the way for so many young people that in this season aren't getting what they want, but that doesn't have to define them. So you're awesome. Thanks, church.